She was on her third attempt at the sauce when I walked in. I know it was the third because the first two were cooling in small bowls on the counter, labeled in her handwriting, too sharp. Better but still wrong. And she was standing at the stove with a wooden spoon and the expression of someone who has decided to win an argument with a recipe. She didn't hear the door. She didn't hear me set my bag down. She was talking to the pan in a low voice that I couldn't quite make out, and her hair was coming loose from the knot she'd put it in, and the kitchen smelled like garlic and something warm I didn't have a name for yet, and I stood in the hallway for a moment without deciding what to do because I was not supposed to be home for another 2 hours and I was not sure what I was looking at. Then I understood what I was looking at. And I thought, with the specific quiet of a man who has been telling himself a very convincing story for 8 months, I have made a significant error in my accounting. My name is Owen Marsh. I'm 35. I work in urban planning for the city, permits, zoning reviews, long meetings about land use in rooms where the air conditioning is always either too cold or not working, and I rent the larger bedroom of a 2-bedroom flat in a converted Victorian terrace that costs more than it should and has a boiler with opinions. I have lived there for 2 years. She has lived there for 8 months. Since the previous roommate moved to Edinburgh, and I put up a listing that I wrote 3 times because I wasn't sure how to describe the boiler without being dishonest. Her name is Priya Nair. She was 31 when she moved in on a Saturday in March, arriving with more books than any single person should be able to transport in one trip and a very small cactus she introduced to me by name. The cactus was called Gerald. She said she had named him ironically, and then she moved Gerald to the sunniest spot in the kitchen window with the care of someone who was not being ironic at all. She was a secondary school art teacher, which explained the books and also, I would come to understand, a great many other things about her. She had warm brown eyes and paint-stained fingers on any given day, not the careful kind of stained, but the absorbed kind. The kind that happens when you are doing something you are inside of, rather than looking at. She carried a small folded piece of paper in her back pocket at all times, which she unfolded at odd moments to look at, and which I would later learn was a list she updated every Sunday of things she was curious about that week. That list was everywhere. That's important. We had settled into a roommate dynamic that was comfortable is not quite the right word. Comfortable suggests ease, and there was ease, but there was also something underneath it that I had been treating as background noise because I had decided it was background noise, and treating it as anything else would require reorganizing several things I had arranged quite carefully. We cooked on alternate nights, which had been my suggestion, and which she had agreed to with the enthusiasm of someone who had been living on instant noodles and ambient guilt for the 3 months between her last place and this one. This had seemed like a practical arrangement. It had become, without my noticing when exactly, the part of the day I organized the rest of the day around. She cooked Tuesdays and Thursdays. I cooked Mondays and Wednesdays. Fridays were negotiated in real time. I had not asked myself why I had started, around month 4, to put slightly more effort into Mondays and Wednesdays. I had not examined this. I was examining it now, standing in the hallway watching her label a 3rd bowl. I told myself we were simply good housemates. I was quite committed to this. The thing I had never let myself look at directly. I looked forward to the evenings the way I did not look forward to many things. Not just the food, the conversation that happened around it, which was always more interesting than it had any reason to be. Because Priya Nair had a way of asking questions that weren't the questions people usually asked. Not how was your day, but what was the most surprising thing that happened? Or did you make anything today that you're proud of? And the first few times I had been caught off guard and given real answers before I could give the reflex ones. She listened the way people do when they are genuinely collecting information rather than waiting for their turn. She had opinions about everything and delivered them without aggression, which was rarer than it should have been. She laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them, which should have been annoying and wasn't. She had been here 8 months. I had learned more about what I was actually like in 8 months of Tuesday and Thursday dinners than in the previous several years of living alone. I was choosing not to know what to do with this. The inciting moment, the specific event that made not knowing untenable, was not the cooking. That came later. It started 6 weeks ago, with a Wednesday. My meeting had run over, which meant I was late to cook, which meant I texted her to say I'd be 40 minutes behind and she should eat whatever was in the fridge. She texted back, "Already started. Come home when you're done." I had assumed she meant she was eating cereal or toast or something equally low effort and non-consequential. I came home to the table set, and a dal that had been simmering for an hour, and the particular smell of a flat that has been cooked in properly, and she was reading at the table and looked up and said, "It keeps well, it's fine." She had cooked on my night. Not because she wanted to. Because I was late and she didn't want me to come home to an empty kitchen after a long day. I sat down. I ate the dal. I said it was excellent, which it was. She said she'd been trying to get the tempering right for months. I said it tasted like she'd got it right. She folded the piece of paper back into her pocket. She'd been reading it, not a book, and she said, "Good. I was worried about the mustard seeds." I thought about the mustard seeds for an unreasonable amount of time after that. The second thing was a month ago, when I had a bad week. Bad weeks in urban planning look, from the outside, like nothing at all. They are bureaucratic and slow and full of the kind of obstruction that leaves no visible mark but accumulates like sediment. I had had 3 consecutive days of it, and by Thursday evening I was in the flat before her for once, sitting on the sofa with nothing on the television and no particular desire to move. She came home at 6:30, assessed the situation in approximately 4 seconds, and said nothing. She went to the kitchen. 20 minutes later, she brought 2 bowls of khichdi to the sofa. The plain, simple kind. Rice and lentils. The kind that is not impressive and is not trying to be. And she sat at the other end of the sofa and put the television on and didn't ask me anything. She just sat there. In the particular way of someone who knows the difference between company and conversation and has decided you need the first one tonight and not the second. I ate the khichdi. I watched something I cannot now recall. At some point I said, "Thank you," and she said, "The mustard seeds are still not right," and I laughed. Actually laughed, the first time in 3 days, and she did not make anything of it. I filed this in the category of very good housemate. I was running out of room in that category. The third thing was her list. She had left it on the kitchen table one morning, unfolded. Unusual. She normally kept it in her pocket, and I had glanced at it, not meaning to read it, and stopped. Most of it was the usual kind of thing, a botanical question, a historical fact she was chasing down, a film she wanted to find. But at the bottom, added in slightly different ink, newer, "Why does Owen always cook more food than we can eat?" She had noticed. She had put it on the list of things she was curious about. I folded it back the way she kept it. I put it beside her coffee mug. I went to work and thought about it the entire 20 minutes of the commute. And I did not examine why, and I did not decide anything, and I was very busy for the rest of that week and the week after, and I did not look at the question again. The fourth thing I noticed was a conversation I had not been part of. This was 3 weeks ago. I came into the kitchen on a Sunday morning and she was on the phone, sitting cross-legged on the counter the way she did when she was talking to her sister, and she was saying something I caught only the end of. "No. It's different. He's different." I don't know how to explain the difference. She looked up and saw me and said into the phone, "I have to go," and hung up and said, "Morning," in the tone of someone who had decided that the best response to being heard was to not acknowledge being heard. I said, "Morning." I made coffee. She stayed on the counter. The piece of paper was in her hand, half unfolded, and she was looking at it rather than at me. "Are you adding to the list?" I said. "Thinking about it," she said. I handed her the mug she used, the blue one, handle slightly sticky from a label she'd half removed, and she took it with both hands and looked at her list and didn't add anything. Not while I was there. I went to get ready for the day, and when I came back she had folded the paper and pocketed it and was washing up her mug. And the question that had almost been added to the list was wherever she kept the things she hadn't decided yet. I spent the following 3 weeks being careful, precise about the distance, correct about the arrangement, very focused on the work, on the permits, on the long meetings about land use. I cooked on Mondays and Wednesdays with the same care I always did, which told me something about myself I was not reading carefully enough. And then the meeting that was supposed to run until 7 ended at 5 because the other party canceled. And I was home by 5:15, which was 2 hours and 45 minutes before I was supposed to be anywhere, and Priya was at the stove with 3 bowls and a wooden spoon, and the expression of someone in private conversation with a recipe. I stood in the hallway. She hadn't noticed me. She was tasting from the spoon, frowning, reaching for something, adjusting. The kitchen light was on, and the evening outside was dark, and the flat was warm, in the specific way it got when someone had been cooking for a while. Gerald the cactus was on the windowsill doing whatever cacti do. The piece of paper, her list, was unfolded beside the hob, which she never did, which meant she had been here long enough to set it down and forget it was out. I did not announce myself immediately. I know that I should have. I know the correct thing was to say her name in the first 5 seconds, not to stand in a hallway watching someone who did not know she was being watched. I know this. What happened instead was that I stood there for 30 seconds that I will not get back, looking at the 3 bowls and the careful labels, and the woman at the stove who had spent 4 Saturdays on a sauce I had described once. And something that had been arranged very carefully in my chest rearranged itself without asking permission. That is the honest version. It felt late in arriving. It felt also like the only version that was actually true. I said her name. She spun around. The wooden spoon made a brief arc. A small amount of sauce landed on the tiles. She stared at me. I stared at her. Neither of us spoke for a moment. "You're early," she said. "The meeting canceled," I said. She looked at the 3 bowls. She looked at me. She looked at the bowls again, with the expression of someone calculating how many explanations are available and which one is structurally sound. "I was practicing," she said. "I can see that," I said. "I wanted to." She stopped. Started again. "You said once that your mum used to make this specific sauce. You described it and I wanted to. I was trying to get it right." She said this last part quickly, like speed might make it go past me before I could understand it properly. "It's not ready." I looked at the counter, at too sharp and better but still wrong in her handwriting. "How long have you been at this?" I said. She pressed her lips together. "Today is the 4th time," she said, quietly. "I've been trying the sauce for 4 Saturdays." Something in my chest shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. "Priya," I said. "It's just dinner," she said in the voice of someone saying the thing that isn't the thing. "It's not just dinner," I said. "You've been making the same sauce for a month because I described it once. That's not just dinner." She didn't look away. She was very still, the wooden spoon held against her side. her hair half out of its knot. Standing in the light of the kitchen she had been in for 4 Saturdays, working on something I was never supposed to know about. She looked like herself, entirely herself. Not the version she produced for the outside world, but the version that labeled bowls and kept lists and introduced cacti by name, and had, for 8 months. Made the evenings the best part of my days. "You can say it's nothing," she said, "if that's easier." She was giving me the door, standing there with sauce on the tiles and flour somewhere on her sleeve, and she was holding the door open with both hands. "It's not nothing," I said. She went very still. "I cook more than we can eat," I said, "because I wanted an excuse for you to eat with me. I have been doing this since month 3. Your list is not wrong." Her hand tightened on the wooden spoon. "My list," she said. "You left it out." I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to read it." But the question was there. She closed her eyes for a half-second. When she opened them, she said, "I should have put it back in my pocket." "I'm glad you didn't," I said. She looked at me. The kitchen was warm, and the sauce was still on the hob, and Gerald was on the windowsill, and the piece of paper was unfolded beside the hob with the question at the bottom in newer ink. And she crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and kissed me. Not tentative, not asking permission, just the honest and decisive thing. The way she did everything when she stopped being careful about it. When she pulled back, I said, "The sauce is going to burn." She turned around, grabbed the spoon, stirred. She tasted it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, without turning around, "It's right. It's finally right. Let me try," I said. She handed me the spoon. I tasted it. It was right, warm and deep, and slightly complicated in the way she'd been chasing for a month, and it tasted exactly the way I described it, which meant she had been listening to me describe a sauce my mother used to make, and it held that detail for however many weeks it took her to decide to try. "It's right," I said. She took the spoon back. She was looking at the hob. "I wasn't going to tell you," she said. "I was going to make it one night and not say anything about how long it had taken." "I know," I said. "That's very you." She looked over her shoulder at me. The expression on her face was the version with no professional distance in it, no classroom management, no landlord-tenant courtesy, just Priya in the kitchen having been found out. "This is going to change the cooking arrangement," she said. "Probably," I said. "Gerald is going to be very smug about this," she said. "He's had opinions for months." I had poor survival instincts around Priya Nair from the beginning. I simply didn't know until I came home early on a Thursday in November and found her practicing. 3 months later, the cooking arrangement had technically dissolved into something more collaborative and less scheduled, which was an improvement by every measure except the one where I no longer had a reason to count down to Tuesdays and Thursdays. I didn't need the reason anymore. The list on her piece of paper had changed, still updated every Sunday, still folded in her back pocket, still unfolded at odd moments over dinner while she thought out loud about whatever she was curious about that week. The question at the bottom was gone. I did not ask her when she removed it. I already knew the answer. 8 months later, her sister visited from Bristol. She had heard about me, apparently, in the specific way that means someone has mentioned you with a frequency and a particular quality of detail that does not go unnoticed. Her sister looked at Gerald on the windowsill and then at me and said, "She's been trying to get that sauce right since August." She said it like a fact she had been holding for a while. Priya said, "From the kitchen, I'm right here." Her sister said, "I know," and winked at me. 2 years later, when people asked how we got together, she told the version where she was found out. The 3 bowls, the wooden spoon, the tile with sauce on it, because she liked the look on my face when she got to the part about the 4 Saturdays. What she always added, at the end, was the part I hadn't known until she told me that she had gone back to her room after the Wednesday doll, the night she'd cooked on my night without being asked, and added to the bottom of the list, "I think I'm in trouble." She'd left it on the list for 6 weeks. Right up until the meeting canceled early, and I came home and found her standing at the stove. Nothing important had appeared overnight. It had simply stopped hiding. What would you have done if you came home early and found someone quietly, privately making something for you? Something they'd been working on for weeks that you were never supposed to know about. And have you ever kept doing something a little more carefully, a little more often, for someone you hadn't admitted to yourself yet that you cared about that much? Tell me in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.